It's time to clean the chokes. How often do you do it?
You shouldn't have to clean your chokes too often, to be honest. You might have a bit of an idea from my videos how often I shoot. I probably clean my chokes like once a year, something like that. Provided you, when you do it, you do it properly and you clean your gun every time you use it. You should find that they don't take a lot of maintenance, but it is important to do it every so often. So today I'll run through what I do, just maybe give you a bit of an idea really. So to start off with, safety first, take the barrels off before you take the chokes out. Because you don't really want a gun pointed in your face really. So, as I'm sure you all know, take the fore end off, take the barrels off. Now, I have cleaned this already since I last used it, not amazingly, but fairly clean. Now, you should have a choke key. I've actually lost mine, so I'm going to use a penny, which works just as well. You shouldn't need to really tighten these down when you put them away, so bear that in mind because you can damage the threads. But if you look, again, I don't know if you can see the notches at the end of the barrel. I'm just going to put this in there. And normally you should be able to just do these finger tight, but that just helps it on its way. So just loosen that, let it unscrew a bit. And same on the other one. And then just unscrew them. Just give me another two. So there's one. Put that to one side. There's the other one. So let's get them clean. So the first thing you're going to need to do is just give them a really good soak. Now what I like to do is get an old air gun pellet tin. You can see I've used that before. Just pop them in. And give them a really good soak with bore cleaner. I use Napier gun cleaner, pretty all-purpose really. Use it on my rimfire, shotgun. The only thing I don't use it on really is my air rifle. And just give them a good soak. Make sure you get all the threads. Don't be afraid of it, because you know if you get like a quantity of it in the actual tin, then that helps as well. Move it all around in there. That should be enough. Maybe a bit more than is required. And yeah, just give that a good soak, just leave it for 5 or 10 minutes, come back to it, and we'll go from there. Right, they've been soaking for about 10 minutes or so. Take them out, just give them a bit of a scrub really. I've got a bit of an old toothbrush, this is actually a head off my electric toothbrush, I don't use anymore. And just give it a good scrub. Now obviously with mine, which I'll show you in a bit, I've got some grease on it, so that can take a minute or two to clean off. But it's not a huge job, to be honest. Same with the other one. Most of it's come off already, to be honest, because of the soap. And if you want, you can stick the toothbrush inside it as well. Give it a bit of a clean that way as well. That's the other thing you can do to the shotgun barrels before you put these back in, is just to get this and put it in and just give the threads a bit of a wipe with that as well. That always helps. But overall, they're both pretty clean now. I think that'll do the job, to be honest. So, let's get an oily rag. Just give them a bit of a wipe down, really. Just get any remaining residue off. If there is a little bit of grease still stuck between the threads, it doesn't really matter. You're only going to put more on anyway, to be honest. But what you're just trying to do is get off any build-up of lead, because obviously if lead gets stuck in there, you can damage the threads over time, and if you've got loose chokes, that can be quite dangerous, so it's always a good thing to do. The other thing that can happen, which a lot of people don't necessarily consider, is that they can get seized, because what can happen is moisture gets underneath into the threads, and they are supposed to like corrode or rust a little bit, and you can't get the bloody things out at all. I've often seen on the Pigeon Watch forums people asking what the best thing to do is. I think the general consensus is to get a hairdryer on it, heat it up, and then you should be able to get them out fairly easily. But you have to be mindful of these things, and it's something to check if you're buying a new gun. Check the state of the chokes, because some people don't ever clean their guns. You would be surprised. I mean, the thing is, modern shotguns like my Browning, you probably could, you could probably shoot them for 100 years without ever cleaning them, and they'd still operate. But obviously, if you ever want to actually take the chokes out and change them, that could be a bit of a problem. But yeah, there we are. Those are done now. Now I've got some gun grease here. This is Napier gun grease, and yeah, you just get a little bit of it. Just put a bit on your finger, just like that, and just try and make sure you get some all on the threads. You don't have to cover the threads completely, but just make sure that you've got one side of it at least, because obviously as it twists in, it'll wipe them all around the threads. But if you've got some on your finger like I just showed you, then you can put some pretty much all the way around. I might put a little bit more on actually, just a spot. And there we are. So that one's cleaned and greased. As I said, make sure you give the threads on the gun a quick clean. You don't need to grease them obviously, because you're greasing the chokes. But you just want to make sure there's no bits of grit or lead, let's be honest, stuck on them. Potentially, I mean, obviously I've never seen, or I must admit heard of it happening, but potentially, in theory at least, if your chokes become loose and you shoot the gun, it could just open up like a banana. So it's something to bear in mind. But as I said, as long as you clean them properly and then you grease them when you put them back in, they should be good for a good year or so, to be honest, as long as you take care of the gun generally and you make sure you clean it after you've used it. So there we are. That's the two chokes done. Let's get them back in the gun. I thought I might as well quickly show you. I'll just dip this in the bore cleaner, just get that down the barrels, and just give the threads a bit of a scrub on either side. You don't have to go mad. Just make sure there's no residue in there. And maybe get a cloth with your little finger, stick that in and make sure that's nice and clean. So they are now. And stick them back in. Now I've got to look what these are actually. Okay, that's modified, so that's going to go in the bottom barrel. Slide them in, screw them up. And this one is should be improved, which it is, improved modified, so I'm going to put that in the top. Obviously I have other chokes as well, but these are the two I tend to like to use. So keep screwing them down. Now, I know I said finger tight, but it can make it a bit easier, to be honest, just to use a penny again. Just stick that in there. Just screw it down. And not too tight. Don't do it too tight, but obviously tight enough at the same time, because you don't want it to become loose. And that's something to bear in mind actually. Whilst you should be able to leave these alone for about a year now. Obviously, every time you do shoot your gun and you've cleaned it, just make sure that they're tight. Just give them a tight. And to be honest, I'll check that they're tight again before you go out the next time, because it is potentially dangerous if you've got loose chokes. As I said, I've never heard of anyone having any serious problems, but you never know. So there we are. They're both in nice and tight. Let's give that a bit of a wipe. Let's get the barrels back on the gun. So yeah, the barrels have got the chokes back in, all nice and cleaned and greased. Ready to put them back on the action. All away. We've done this a million times. Put the fore end on. There we go. Ready for another year. Like I said, as long as you grease them, you shouldn't have any problems. But make sure you always check if you're buying a new gun. And if they won't come out, don't buy it, unless you're not bothered, but I wouldn't buy it anyway. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Like and subscribe.